The jungle river was colder than it looked. Morning mist clung to the surface like breath held too long, curling around boots, gear, and bare arms as the training exercise reset for another round. Palm fronds swayed overhead, their shadows cutting jagged patterns across the water. For most of the men gathered there, this was familiar ground. Another endurance drill, another test of dominance and pressure. For her, it was something else entirely. She stood waist deep in the river, soaked to the bone, dark tactical shirt clinging tight and torn from earlier runs through brush and rock. A thin line of blood traced down from her hairline, not enough to slow her, just enough to sting. Her breathing was steady, controlled, too controlled for someone who had just been shoved back into the water. Around her, 4 trainees laughed, not loud, not openly, the kind of laughter that lived in smirks and exchanged glances. The kind that came from certainty. "She's done," one of them muttered, gripping her arm as if it were already decided. Another stepped closer, water sloshing as he planted his feet. "They said mixed unit pressure test," he said. Didn't say anything about going easy. They closed in, hands on her shoulders, forearms, upper arms, pinning points they'd practiced 100 times on each other. To them, it was procedure. Control the center. Break balance, force submission, clean and efficient. What they didn't see was the way her eyes changed. Not panic, not fear, calculation. She had been quiet since the exercise began, answering questions with nods, taking hits without complaint, watching everything. The river, the footing, their spacing, their habits. She had noticed which one favored his right side, which one leaned forward when confident, which one tightened his grip too early. She let her head dip, just enough to sell it. The grip on her arms tightened. That's it. Someone said behind her, "Stay down." Across the riverbank, more figures watched, rows of them, Navy SEALs, experienced operators, instructors, observers, over 300 pairs of eyes tracking the drill with detached interest. Most had already written the outcome in their minds. Strength of numbers wins. It always does. Except sometimes it doesn't. Her heel shifted beneath the water, finding a rock she'd clocked minutes earlier. Her shoulders relaxed a fraction, baiting them into leaning closer. One of the men laughed again, and that was the moment she moved. Not with brute force, with precision. Her elbow snapped backward into the ribs of the man behind her. Not hard enough to injure, just enough to shock air from his lungs. At the same time, she twisted her torso, rolling her shoulder free from the loosest grip. Water exploded outward as she stepped in, not back, collapsing their formation before they understood what was happening. She dropped her weight suddenly, pulling one man off balance, using his own grip as leverage. He stumbled, splashing down hard. Another reached for her, too slow. She redirected his arm, turned with it, and sent him sprawling into the river with a sharp, efficient shove. The laughter was gone now. Breathing turned ragged. Surprise cracked through confidence. Still, part 1 of the story ends here, before the full storm breaks, because what mattered most in that moment wasn't what she did next. It was what everyone realized all at once. The watching SEALs along the bank had gone quiet. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Instructors straightened. Someone lowered a clipboard without realizing it. This wasn't chaos. This was control. The woman standing in the river wasn't flailing or reacting. She was moving with intent, every step measured, every breath timed. The cut on her forehead didn't slow her. The cold didn't shake her. Being outnumbered didn't faze her. One of the trainees hesitated. That hesitation cost him. She didn't chase. She didn't rush. She simply adjusted her stance, eyes locked forward, calm settling over her features like armor. The river rippled around her legs, carrying away the last traces of laughter. Up on the bank, a senior officer leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowed, not in anger but in recognition. Someone had made a mistake. They hadn't tested her. They had underestimated her. And as the jungle fell into an unnatural stillness, everyone watching understood the same truth at the same time. They had picked the wrong woman, and this was only the beginning. The water settled for half a second. That was all she gave them. The hesitation among the remaining trainees was brief but fatal. Confidence, once cracked, never comes back clean, and she knew exactly how to widen the fracture. She exhaled slowly, shoulders loose, stance grounded. No wasted motion, no emotion on her face now, just focus. One of the men lunged first, trying to recover momentum. He came in fast, powerful, certain that aggression would reclaim control. She stepped inside his reach. Her forearm snapped up, not to block but to redirect, turning his force across his own centerline. At the same time, her knee drove up into his thigh, not hard enough to shatter, just enough to numb. His balance vanished. She twisted his arm, guided his fall, and let gravity finish the lesson. He hit the water with a sharp cry, gasping as cold flooded his mouth. The third man circled wide, smarter than the rest. He waited, eyes locked on her shoulders, looking for a tell. She gave him one, a stumble, a slight dip of her weight to the left. He took it. The moment he committed, she pivoted, foot sliding across the slick riverbed, and snapped a palm strike into his chest. The impact wasn't dramatic, but it stole his breath instantly. She followed with a sweep, hooking his ankle with surgical precision. His feet left the water, and he crashed down hard, shock rippling through his body as the river swallowed him. Now there was only one left, the biggest, the one who had spoken first. He stood frozen for half a second, longer than he should have, chest heaving, eyes darting between his fallen teammates and the woman standing calmly before him. The river lapped softly around their legs. Somewhere in the jungle, a bird cried out, sharp and distant, "You think you're better?" He snapped, anger replacing confidence. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. He charged. This time, she met him head on. Their collision sent water flying in every direction. He tried to overpower her, arms locking around her shoulders, muscle and momentum driving forward. For a split second, it looked like brute strength might finally win. Then she dropped her center of gravity. Her foot slid behind his heel, her shoulder turned, her hips rotated, a textbook movement, one taught in advanced close quarters combat, not basic training. His grip became his mistake. She used it. In one smooth motion, she lifted, turned, and dumped him into the river with controlled violence. He hit flat, air blasting from his lungs as the impact stunned him. Before he could recover, she was already stepping back, hands up, breathing steady. 4 men down, seconds had passed. Along the riverbank, silence spread like a shockwave. 301 Navy SEALs stood watching, none of them speaking. Some stared openly now, disbelief etched across hardened faces. Others narrowed their eyes, recognizing the techniques, the economy of movement, the discipline behind every action. This wasn't instinct. This was training, elite training. An instructor took a step forward, then stopped himself. A commander crossed his arms slowly, jaw tightening, not in anger but in calculation. The woman stood alone in the water, chest rising and falling evenly, eyes scanning her surroundings not for threats but for confirmation. The exercise wasn't over until it was called. She knew that. They knew that now, too. One of the trainees groaned, trying to push himself upright. She didn't move toward him. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was enough. "Hold!" A voice finally called from the bank. The word carried weight. She relaxed instantly, hands dropping to her sides, posture shifting from combat, ready to neutral in a heartbeat. The switch was so clean it sent another ripple of unease through the observers. A senior officer stepped forward, boots crunching on wet gravel. He studied the scene, the men in the water, the disturbed river, the woman standing untouched in the center of it all. "Name," he said. She met his gaze without hesitation and gave it. Recognition flickered across his face, not surprise, but confirmation, as if something he'd suspected had just been proven beyond doubt. Murmurs spread through the ranks now, low and restrained. Not ridicule, respect. The officer nodded once. That'll be all. She turned without ceremony and walked toward the bank, water dripping from torn fabric, blood drying at her temple. No celebration, no acknowledgement of the eyes on her back. Behind her, the jungle seemed to breathe again. The men she'd folded were being helped up now, shaken, humbled, silent. None of them met her eyes. They didn't have to. Every single person there understood the same thing. What they had just witnessed wasn't a fluke. It was a warning, and whatever came next would only get worse for anyone who underestimated her again. The jungle never forgot silence like that. Even after the command was given and movement slowly returned to the riverbank, something had shifted. Conversations restarted in whispers. Boots scraped gravel more carefully. Eyes followed her, not with curiosity now, but with caution. She stood at attention near the edge of the clearing, water still dripping from her sleeves, torn fabric clinging to muscle, hardened by years of work no one here had witnessed. Her breathing was calm, her pulse steady. The cut on her forehead had dried into a dark line, unnoticed by her, unforgettable to everyone else. The 4 trainees stood several meters away, soaked, bruised in pride more than body. None of them spoke. One kept his gaze fixed on the ground. Another stared at the river like it had betrayed him. The biggest of them, the last one to fall, rolled his shoulder slowly, jaw tight, replaying the moment again and again in his mind. It didn't make sense to him, and that was the worst part. A senior commander stepped forward, rank unmistakable even without insignia. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. 301 Navy SEALs straightened instinctively, the clearing snapping into order around him. That, he said, gesturing once toward the river, was not part of the original plan. No one laughed, no one breathed too loudly. His eyes shifted to her. You could have ended it faster. Yes, sir, she replied evenly. You didn't? No, sir. Why? She paused, not from fear, but from consideration. They needed to learn, she said, not get hurt. That answer landed harder than any strike. A few heads turned, a few brows furrowed. Among men trained to dominate, to overwhelm, to neutralize threats at all costs, restraint carried a different kind of weight. The commander studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once, slow, deliberate. You broke their formation in under 10 seconds, he said. You controlled 4 operators without escalation, and you disengaged clean. Yes, sir. He turned slightly, addressing the watching ranks. What you just saw was not strength versus strength. It was discipline versus arrogance. No one argued. Outnumbered, he continued, does not mean outmatched. The words sank deep. The trainees who had gone into the river confident now stood stripped of that certainty. Not humiliated, educated, there was a difference, and every seasoned operator there understood it. The commander looked back at her. You were told this was a pressure test. Yes, sir. You turned it into a lesson. A faint ripple moved through the crowd. Not applause, not approval. Recognition. He stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough that it carried without being broadcast. You've operated before. It wasn't a question. She met his gaze. Yes, sir. Places we don't list. Yes, sir. Another pause. Then, you're cleared. She nodded and stepped back. As she walked past the assembled SEALs, something subtle happened. One by one, eyes followed her, not challengingly, not skeptically, respectfully. Some nodded without realizing it. Others stood a little straighter. She didn't look at them. She didn't need to. Behind her, the trainees she'd folded finally understood what had happened. This wasn't a fluke. This wasn't luck. This wasn't about gender, size, or numbers. This was about mastery. Later, when the clearing had emptied and the jungle reclaimed its sounds, one instructor turned to another and said quietly, "They picked the wrong woman." The other shook his head. "No," he replied, "they underestimated the right one." And long after that day, among whispered conversations and unspoken caution, the story lived on. Not as a boast, not as a warning shouted aloud, but as a reminder etched into muscle memory and mindset alike. Skill doesn't announce itself. Experience doesn't need permission, and sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one no one thought to fear.